It's me, Gillen. Gillen's got Parkinson's. Now, set the scene. Imagine Saturday afternoon. So you've not been to school. You've been to town with your best mates, and you've got your bell bottoms on. Yeah, with a splash of brute. Splash it all over. And off you pop with you've got hair. And you come home with a little bit of plastic bag with Tubular Bells in it, the album, and a big bag on Woolworths of Humbrol paint. And you've got some soldiers from the stamp corner, assuming you live in Doncaster in the 1970s and you've been to the stamp corner, wherever you go for them. Imagine that scene. You've had your tea, sausage, chips and beans, and family are all settled in downstairs to watch upstairs, downstairs, whereas you and your pals are upstairs and you are about to play a war game. Imagine that. Now, just imagine that. This is a big scene setter. That is, I am going to argue, the golden age of wargaming, the 1970s. Nothing better before or since. Partly because it was all new. It was all happening. We were so blessed with what was about to hit us, and we didn't even know it. We had board games in the 1970s. We rolled dice. We moved plastic pawns. There were thousands of gamers who were reenacting World War II, Gettysburg. Games in places that never existed. Fantasy games. The golden age of wargaming. A decade when hobbyists turned living rooms into battlefields, and publishers put out some of the best, most ambitious games ever that all other games have come from. Without those guys in the 70s, without the Featherstones, without the Bill Lammings, without the Gary Gygax, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be doing what we're doing, what we're loving. I remember an interview I saw with John Lennon. And again, when I was but a youngster, and he was saying, he believed, he was born in sort of 1940-ish. So he was 18, teenager, when 58, rock and roll, the big music explosion came. And for him, as a musician, could not have been born at a more perfect time. If he'd been born before, he'd have missed it. And if he'd been born after, he'd have missed it. He might have benefited from it, but he would have missed it. He wouldn't have been in that maelstrom of excitement. I suppose today, younger viewers and members of the team, your golden age is probably IT. You're having that feeling with new games coming out or new technology on your phones. That's where you're at. But for wargaming, for us, it was the 1970s. No question about it. To understand the 1970s, and if you've not been through it, that's probably most of you, we need to rewind a bit. In the 50s, 60s, Avalon Hill pioneered an awful lot of board games. And I've looked at two of them, Sorcerer's Cave and the Mystic Wood, who are later than the 50s and 60s. They're Avalon Hill in the Golden Age period. They had titles like, let me think, Tactics and Gettysburg, and they brought military history into a box. You could buy it in a box. But by the early 70s, something big was brewing. It was bubbling away. Because a new generation of designers were arriving like this. And what they wanted was more detail, more realism, more games. And the gamers were ready for it. Oh boy, were we ready for it. I cannot tell you how I felt at this time. It's unbelievable how exciting it was. Really top dollar. I'm going to pause there for a minute with a little montage of magazines and rules from the period. Thought you might like that. Hope you enjoyed that. Now we enter next the sort of SPI and hex revolution. SPI, Simulations and Simulations Publications Incorporated. SPI, founded in '69 by James Dunnigan. They had everything. It was mad. Now, these guys were too complicated for me. I wasn't an SPI player, and you'll see why in a minute. SPI looked at every possible part of a wargame. It's what I would nowadays would do when I'm doing all of my campaigning. I have maps, I have hexes, I have supply depots, I have a background story. Now, SPI were factual as far as I remember, and they would bring out a magazine. And in the magazine, they would look at a specific theatre of war. Normandy, Gettysburg, they might have a Napoleonic Wars session. And they leaned heavily onto the hex and counter gameplay, moving into squares. Maps were divided into hexes and squares, and you could move along roads, a bit like if you played Kingmaker, that sort of idea, but on a grand scale. So it's all the planning, it's all the detailed stuff going on. Where are your supply routes? How are you getting there? And when two counters meet, that would be where you could put in a war game. You don't war game the rest. That's happening somewhere else. You as a commander of that yellow tiddlywink have no influence on what's happening on them other yellow tiddlywinks. Now, if you've got a lot of players, you might have one of them who's older maybe, or more wiser, or it's their game. I've bought it, so I'm being in charge. And they command, you take your cavalry down that road and off you go and do it. But it was really detailed. The rules were, too detailed, I feel. And if you look at, and we will look at Bill Lamin's campaign rules, there's over 100 different things to do for each part of the campaign. Just crossing the sea, setting up a camp. War Games Research Group, you have to take calculators with you. 1 man equals 33, so you've just killed 9 33rds. When you've killed 33 33rds, I'll take a man off. It was bonkers. Too much, major effort. But it was a golden era for those who wanted to delve deep into history. Because we're talking about history with SPI. We're not really going much further than proper, genuine, deep down history. I couldn't get into it. But I was only 12. So, hey, what can I tell you? But not all battles were being fought on paper, because some people, some SPI players, some people who were just coming into the hobby, which is where I came in. I didn't come in, I wasn't a paper hexy player. who then went, oh, you know what, let's get some soldiers out. I came into a club that had soldiers. So I started properly officially joining a War Games club in 1972, autumn 1972. And I went to a club that war gamed, and there were people there doing 300 scale micro armour, and there were a lot of people doing Hinchcliffe Napoleonics. Now I don't know how common and popular Hinchcliffe are around the world, but as a UK wargamer, they were big. And people were also buying minifigs, but miniature figurines from Southampton. But not really for Napoleonics. At my club, I can only speak from my experience, we were playing with Hinchcliffe, partly because one of the guys at the club worked at the shop where we bought the figures, and we would give him a list of what we wanted, and he'd order them, and then when we had a few bob, we'd go in and we'd buy them. And Rolo's getting all excited about that, but I don't know why, because he's only 5, so he went around. But suddenly, we started to get new rules. Now, I'm trying to think what the first ones were, and I'm going to say chainmail. Chainmail were the first rules that were designed for historically led figures. I mean, I must admit, the first ones I played with were War Games Research Group. That's how I was introduced to wargaming, through the War Games Research Group Napoleonic rules. But I know that chainmail started to have games where you had metal figures and you moved them around, and they were even starting to get fantasy games. And I know, so I bought my first fantasy figures 73 miniature figurines, who had an official license from the Tolkien estate to do Lord of the Rings. So they were official. There were no copyright arguments or anything. And that was in the UK. In America, in 74, and this is before I was aware of it, Gary Gygax, Dave Anderson, was it Anderson? Dave, what was he called? Arneson. I should remember that. I had to look it up. I should remember that, shouldn't I? Like Arnie Sacknewson in Journey to the Centre of the Earth. They published Dungeons and Dragons, which was a spin-off from miniatures rules that created an entirely new genre of wargaming. That is role-playing. Miniature figurines weren't role-playing. They were the historical version of Lord of the Rings. So you bought Uruk-hai, you bought Saruman, you bought Smaug, and you recreated the Battle of the Five Armies, a bit in the same way as you would have done doing Waterloo. So it was historical games first. And if you... Oh no, I'm going to say, if you went back to H.G. Wells, he wasn't doing historical games, but I'm not going to do that because that's not the 1970s. But I will do H.G. Wells at some point because it's interesting. It is interesting. Shut up. Shut up. Get back to reading your book. Teddy there, reading Rupert. He can't read. He only looks at the pictures. Yeah, so, well, no, I'm not doing that. I'm just doing what I'm from 1970, aren't I? Because I'm not bothered about it. So 1970, we were doing, officially, if you're looking at official timeline, SPI. By 72, my experience is I'm doing War Games Research Group, personally. By 73, the historic lads are still doing War Games Research Group. And I know that because in 76, when I was at college, I bought the War Games Research Group Ancients rules. People like Bill Lamming, Donald Featherstone were starting to come up with skirmish games. That was new. And then 74, that's the year before I went to college, Gary Gygax came up with Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I wasn't aware of that. I'd never heard it. I didn't hear of Dungeons and Dragons until 78, 79. Maybe that's when it filtered into the UK. I don't know. And I was at college, and I was young, and I was firm-buttocked. I had other things on my mind, to be honest. I was wargaming, but I was historical wargaming with a little smidgen of fantasy thrown in. But it was Lord of the Rings fantasy, Hobbit fantasy I was doing. The culture of the game in the 70s was something we don't get now. I suppose maybe I should just finish that bit. Yeah, so we get all the companies. I mentioned before, Grenadier, Ralph Arthur. I've just dug out a load of old Ralph Arthur and Citadel figures from the early 70s out of my mum's attic, which have been there for 50 odd years. They've just come to me in boxes. So they're getting unpacked. And I'll have a look at them. Not now, doing this. But we've been impatient, aren't you? Flipping it. Yeah, I'm just trying to think what else came, because I was very UK based. You know what I mean? I'd like built miniature figurines, bit of lambing. I read a lot of Donald Featherstone books. And Hinchcliffe was where I was at. I became more aware of Grenadier and Ralph Arthur in the 80s. So it doesn't really qualify for what I'm talking about, because this whole section's about the 70s. We started to get Citadel Warhammer figures, White Dwarf appears end of the 70s, 77-ish. I've talked about this in a different thing. I'll do some more little pickies of magazines and bits showing it, because I've still got one or two downstairs from olden days when I was a lad. But the 70s weren't just about the games. They weren't just about the figures. We didn't all sit round oohing and ahhing and, ooh, look at me elf. Not to see my troll. Shut up, you dirty beggar. Put him away. I told you about that. Remember what the judge said. But it's about people. We have clubs. Proper big war games clubs. Now, I'm in a club. There's not many of us. It's not like the olden days. Back in the 70s, we used to meet other clubs, like once a month maybe, at their clubhouse, and we'd have games. And they'd come to us, and we'd put on games. And then we'd go to fairs. There's war games fairs now. But it was just amazing. You suddenly realise you weren't the only person. Not only were you not the only person in Doncaster, you weren't the only person in Britain. And then you'd start discovering that you weren't the only person in the world, and this whole, wow, it blew up in front of you. Like an angry boil. It exploded. Ooh, sorry about that. That's not a nice image, is it? When I was at college, every bedroom was a war games factory. There were people painting, or people talking. We're supposed to be doing degrees in learned subjects. People weren't talking about that. They were talking about other things. People were converting stuff. They were discovering new games, new methodology. People started writing their own rules because they weren't happy with the rules they were getting. And they started learning enough of not only about the periods or the types of games they wanted, but the mechanisms of a game, how it works. We learnt that. I played a game this weekend, just gone, a few days ago, and it's all based on average dice because the rules from the 70s. And I've got a box of relatively new average dice. You know the ones 2 3s, 2 4s and a 5, no 1 and no 6. But and I was saying I said to him, look, I've got a dice in here, an average dice, from 1972, first one I ever bought. You can't see the numbers on it. And my mate said, yeah, so have I. He got his out the same. And the sort of creamy plastic looking things with just a cube, really. I think if somebody offered to paint the numbers on, I'd say, no, Lee, that's my first ever dice. That's amazing. That is amazing. I couldn't use it in a game now, a sort of reenactment of the 70s games, because it's got no numbers on it. But I'm not bothered. Right. We had annual pilgrimages. We used to go to Sheffield, Triples. I think it was at the Crucible. I don't know if it was a Crucible that early, but we certainly went to the Triples. And there weren't people dressed up like they are now, steampunk and all that. We're just gamers. And we were hungry. We tracked down tips. We listened. We met people over a sausage sandwich. We bought the newest releases. We played marathon sessions that lasted all night, all weekend. It was unbelievably good. I mean, we get a little snippet of that now as the old gamers I play with. And we're going to do a huge 6mm Napoleonic Russians and French game. And I'll probably spend all day Saturday setting it up. And it'll maybe take 4 days to play. And because I'm lucky, I'm retired, I've got a big garage, and I'm lucky because I've got Parkinson's, so I can't drive, so I don't have a car to go in the garage, so I've got an empty garage. See, there's always a silver lining. I've got a massive wargames room. Showing off. Shut up. Read your book. I was going to say, eat your book. Probably will if I said that to him. You ate his crayons last night, didn't you? I know. Well, I'm not surprised it's turned green. You ate all them crayons. Weirdo. And let's be honest. We weren't talking mass market. We look at complex little bits of things. We were making do. We were using toys. We were using Lego, Airfix bricks. We were using Airfix soldiers. We were using Timpo cowboys, which I'm still using. We were hooked. And we were so excited. It was like the 70s for me as a teenager were confusing for a number of reasons. Because they are for every teenager. Any teenager hits teenagers. You go to bed age 12, wake up age 13, and nothing makes sense. For me, that was 1971. 1970, 71. And I woke up and I went, oh no, nothing's right, everything's wrong, I feel weird. Yup. And you're at a new school, and there's thousands of twerps wandering about, trying to stick your head down the toilet. And all your mates are starting to change, so your mates might not be your mates anymore. And then these people you used to just play Tig with, and Doctor Who, have suddenly changed as well. They've started getting bits and going curvy and not wanting to talk to you. And you go all spotty. But then one day, you're walking through a drab, grey, dreary street in a Yorkshire town. The rain is drizzling down. You turn your Mac, your plastic pack Mac that goes in a little pocket like that, and you pull that up like that, and you hear sounds chattering, and you follow men, not just boys, men, carrying mysterious boxes, wearing all grown-up clothes, big kipper ties. And you say, what's in your box, mister? And they say, come with me. I'm not recommending you do this. And you follow them into a secret club. And you hear the dice hit the table. And you hear people say, cocked dice! No, no, no! Throw it again, they shout. You'll be pulled in to the secret club. You see, this was This was an age, the golden age, because anything went. They were the explorers. They were the Francis Drakes of wargaming. They made battle maps bigger than your table. They made things out of paper. They made things out of card. They made things out of cloth. They made rule books that were thicker than a degree course. They were massive. They tried everything. Space games, naval games, pirates, everything, every part of the world. Australians, Boweries, and we had, I remember doing a game, British Marines, when they first discovered the antipodes, Australia and New Zealand. I know it's the Antipodes, I was being funny. Designers could take weeks deciding a game. They didn't have the sort of financial pressures. It's got to work. It's got to make profit. And the moment we've drained and wrung every microbe of profit out of that game, we're going to stop doing it. We're going to bring out version 2. And to play it, you need version 2, because now version 1's obsolete. Drives me mad. But they didn't have to do that then. They could enjoy the journey. There wasn't the pressure. And look at the legacy they've left us. And I don't care what game you enjoy. If you are a board gamer, you've got to thank Avalon Hill. If you are a sci-fi gamer or a role-play gamer, you've got to thank Gary Gygax. If you are a historical gamer, you've got to thank the guys at Hinchcliffe. You've got to thank the guys at Miniature Figurines and all the other people making figures who I will have a thing about at some point, because without them, there wouldn't be us. Or the us that we are would be different. And I don't want it to be different. I want it to be this. I want it to be what it is. I wanted to go through I can make my own rules. Partly because their rules are that thick. I don't want to read them. I can do some thin ones. Cheat sheets. Try measuring in inches. Do it in centimetres. They did different scales. I mean, I don't know if my enthusiasm comes across as madness. But I just love what I will always believe is the golden age of wargaming. Ta-ra, Chuck!